Craig, thanks for jumping on, dude. It was good to connect with you the other day, but I look forward to diving in here. We've done some talks together, at least during the pandemic, on some online stuff. We work together with Footprint because we love them.
Hmm.
They're scaling opportunities, alternate opportunities than using plastic to nine of the top 10 CPG companies in the world, because we know we have to turn off the faucet of creating plastic. At the same time, we need to gobble up and get rid of the waste that's here. And I know from your first, well, uh, your first big film, Plastic Ocean, was literally, pun intended, diving into the challenges around that stuff. And then we're going to get into, I just want to give everyone, get them all excited, but now we're going to also talk what's behind you right there, the last, as we call it in America, glacier.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And uh and and quite an interesting way that you went into telling that story, which, let's unpack it in a little bit. But I just want to welcome you. Thanks, brother.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here, and as you mentioned, we've got some big issues confronting us over the next couple of decades, and like you, they're issues that I really like diving into, and mainly because I just have this feeling we've got to leave the next generation a better world, and I don't want my legacy to be something that they have to struggle with. Certainly, I've had a great period on this planet and enjoyed everything that environment has afforded me. So that's something I'd like to leave the next generation, and ultimately why I do what I do with the films I make. And I'm sure there's a fair bit of that with likewise with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think, you've had a career in journalism and filmmaking and television and public speaking, but more importantly, you have spent your life enjoying what this blue planet is all
Mm.
about and how precious it is. And and that's the thing. And even with your films, uh you have to be there and go there and get dirty
Yep.
and be a part of it. That's
Yeah.
a different thing than sitting back and having talking heads tell us about the problems and everything else behind it. And I'm assuming this because it happens with me.
Mm.
You learn from the people, you learn from the land that you're on, you learn from the people that have dedicated their lives to said issues. And that's really where they embody and imbue you with that, to then be able to at least tell that story or tell part of that story in a way that hopefully gets transcended into some sort of actionable thing.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's not good enough just to read about it or to hear about it from someone else. If I'm going to tell the story, I need to see it for myself. And I need to hear it from the people that are witnessing what's happening on the ground, that are involved with the science behind studying the effects of things like climate change, single use plastics, biodiversity loss. And ultimately, I think that's the way we get to the truth and we get the audience to understand the truth. I like to take the audience with me and to experience the discoveries that I make, because I'm not a scientist, I'm not an expert in these fields, but I really enjoy the process of discovery, the adventure, the experience of meeting new people and hearing their stories. And ultimately, I think there has to be some translation in order for everyone to understand a lot of these stories. Science, as you know, can be very dense, particularly on issues like climate. There's so many aspects to the climate story and to how we understand that humans have intervened in the natural cycles of climate, that scientists tell it, and they have to tell it in a way that they can all understand each other in a very scientific way. But that's not something that the lay person, the average person on the street, can understand. So one of the jobs that I see that I have is to unpack that science and unpack that language and be able to tell those stories in a way that we can all understand. So I go into my films, particularly when I write them, the scripts, with the basic line that an 8-year-old has to understand what I'm telling them. Because if we can reach the 8-year-old, we can reach everybody else. And ultimately, I love to reach young people, because what they do is they get excited about what they're listening, what they're seeing, what they're learning, and they take their parents along to the films, and they help create awareness within their own households. And certainly that's been the experience I've had with the films that we've made on these issues.
That's such a good point, because I too have seen that when you strike the chord with the younger generation, it almost, in a weird way, Craig, we've become apathetic to our modern day world, right? We've normalized the way, quote unquote, we do things. We've normalized, buying a plastic bottle of water. We've normalized wrapping food in plastic. We've normalized the way we heat our homes, the coal, how we produce things. We've normalized all of that stuff. And at a certain point, we've become blind to the truth of how this stuff is actually being created, the industry behind it, the profits driven with it, and that's the thing. And like you said, unpacking it to the degree of people then getting to understand it, because you can't do it by graphs alone. You're just not gonna get excited by that. And so what do you think is, then I have some other questions around looking at climate and climate change and natural changes. But before that, what do you think? Yes, we both agree on the younger generation. What do you think is one of the best tools right now? I mean, I'm probably answering the question because film is so powerful.
Yes.
The best tool for people to shake out of their own apathetic dreams and modern day conveniences to go, oh shit, I didn't know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Look, that's a great question, because ultimately the best tool is experience. And certainly I've seen that happen in Australia, my country, which has gone through the worst bushfires that they've ever experienced. And in the last year and a half, we've had the worst floods we've ever had. And I've been there during both of those events. I just happened to be back in Australia at that time when these events happened. And it was such a profound experience for so many people who had their homes burnt down, who lost family and friends in the fires, who have lost their homes 2 or 3 times in the 4 floods that we've had since. And as a result of that, what we've seen is we've had a change of government from a conservative-led government that was sponsored by oil, gas and coal, to a government that is now, first of all, has just legislated to recognize climate and have cuts in carbon emissions by 2030 of 43%, and also to push for Australia to become a renewable energy superpower. And that's because people personally experienced what climate crisis means, and they weren't willing to put up with a government or elected representatives that refused to acknowledge that, purely because of the profound profits that are coming in from those industries. So they voted for change, and they didn't just vote out the conservative government and vote in a more socially democratic government. They actually voted out many of the top elected representatives that had held cabinet positions in Parliament, who not only lost the power of government, but also lost their seats. So they're no longer politicians. And what happened was we saw a big push towards independence and Greens politicians with environmental agendas and specifically climate agendas. And climate was the biggest issue of that election. So Australia's turned the corner and now is moving towards a renewable energy future and to limiting its climate footprint. And that's because, going back to your question, people felt firsthand that experience. Now, of course, we don't want people to have to go through that experience because it is ugly, it's emotional, it's a terrible thing. So through the power of films, we're able to bring those experiences, those personal experiences, to audiences that don't live in areas where climate has yet reached. It will, if it hasn't already, it will reach you no matter where you are on the planet. But we're able to tell their stories and show why and how they went through those experiences and why we don't want other people to go through those experiences. So film is incredibly powerful, and it's certainly the films that I've made have put me in a position where I've been invited by governments, corporations, petrochemical companies, airlines, all sorts of companies to go and explain to them what I'm seeing when I'm in the mountains or when I'm in the ocean. Because many of these executives don't have access to that information or that personal experience, and they are willing to learn. And they also want to know how they can become part of the transition from legacy industries, how they can be part of the change of the financial and economic paradigms, these models that have failed us up to this point, and how they can change, but in an orderly transition. Because we do have to have an orderly transition. A disorderly transition into these new paradigms, of course, can be almost as bad as what the climate crisis will bring itself. So that conversation is going on, and I find that the films are great tools to help with those discussions.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a lot of incredible things there. And I think just to add to that point or to highlight, it's really important for people hitting the drum on whatever side they're talking about. We have to work together
Yes.
so that those legacy industries, thank God they're starting to just like, okay, we need to invest. There's enough pressure, even
Mm.
if it's not, in their heart's focus quite yet, they're getting enough pressure to start making those policy changes. We need to do those together because there isn't
Mm.
this dreamlike world where we're going to have a light switch. We're going to turn off the petrochemical companies and turn on electrification. That's a horrible idea,
Mm.
right? It's just,
Yeah.
it's going to blow things up and have untold consequences. Also, the other thing that I don't know if you know, but we filmed all of season 2 of Down to Earth in Australia.
Mm.
And and we were able to, I mean, talk to families. We were in Kangaroo Island. It's
Yes.
like, and like you, nothing is more powerful when you're in the dirt
Yeah.
and when you're hearing from the people. And that's where taking those messages, man. And listen,
Mm.
season 1, this property I'm sitting on was annihilated, right?
Yes.
I lost everything from a 96,000 acre fire,
Yeah.
right? So it's like those things, unfortunately, many people wait far too long. But it's like films and what you're doing is transcending and bringing the emotion to someone so that they can potentially move the needle before they need to wait until it punches them in the face, right?
Yeah. That's it's such I think one of the characteristic traits of humans as a species that we're probably where we fall down the most is we do wait for that, as you say, that punch in the face. I describe humans as being like water. We always take the path of least resistance, which is why we've accepted plastics, right? Which is why we go to a drive-through hamburger place and take a hamburger without actually thinking about where the meat has come from and the person who's had to slaughter that animal on a daily basis, or that animal, the life that it's had, or even the wheat that's been grown to create that bun. The processes behind that small piece of food that you're about to put in your mouth. Because that's what consumerism is about, and the companies that promote it don't want us to think about that, because if we did and stopped and thought about that and then about our footprint, we would never eat these products, we would never fly an aircraft, we wouldn't do many of the things that we do. We certainly wouldn't go to supermarkets and accept the fact that a coconut or a banana, which has the most natural perfect packaging, is wrapped by that company in plastic saran wrap, just so it appears fresher to you. We wouldn't accept these things, but we do because of, to what you said earlier, is convenience. And look, like you, the executive producer of our new film, The Last Glaciers, who lives not far from you, lost his home in the fires. And we went back to his house after the fires, and I was with him when we walked into his house, which had been devastated. There was nothing left of it, 6 feet of ash. And we did that because he wanted people to understand what it feels like to be part of that process of the climate crisis, and to have that slap in the face, that punch in the face that you talk about. So we do need to wake up, to your point. And it's a lot easier to tackle something before it becomes a major problem than it is as that problem is engulfing you. And unfortunately, we're now at that position where we're just about to be engulfed by this issue of climate, by biodiversity loss, and by the single-use plastics issue, which is coating the earth like a disease, and as we now know, is in our food chain and compromising our own human health.
Yeah, man, it is so gnarly. I've been researching and working on a book, and just diving in, and had an incredible talk with another advisor on footprint, Dr. Leo Trisande, right? So talking about all those endocrine disruptors, and gobbling, we're eating a credit card's worth of plastic every week.
Yeah.
And that stuff's bioaccumulating. And,
Yeah.
and like you said, that burger idea, or that burger representation, the GMO wheats, the subsidized meats,
The
the
glyphosate, the chemicals that go on on the crops, which they're detecting now in breakfast cereals we're eating, and foods and burger buns and all sorts of things.
yeah, it just goes on and on. So on the one hand, it's hurting you on so many different levels just consuming it. And then it's connected to a non-integrated way of growing food anyway, directly connected to hurting the environment. So our systems are failing us
Yeah.
from small to large, right? So that
Yes.
system of like the metanomics of it all is a horrible idea, subsidized through taxes. It's just like, what are we doing, right? So there's so much. The thing that I want to kind of crack open, I want to get your point of view, because I've thought about this a lot. And that is, I don't like some of the politicalization of the terms and of the climate change crisis. I don't like where some of it is going. I don't like the knives that some people are using, the judgments and all of that stuff. Because yes, on the one hand, I look at it like we're doing things insane, right? It's just ridiculous. So if you look at it from, we're hurting ourselves by doing these actions, right? We're using, so again, if I consume water from a plastic bottle, it's literally no good for my body, right? Endocrine disruptors, hurting my own fertility, neutering our planet, and then neutering the tadpoles and the fish and everything else. So from my point of view, outside of the politicalization of it, what I love to talk about is common sense of it all. It makes no fucking sense.
Well, the funny thing
For us,
about common
for us to,
sense is that it's not very common, really, is it? I mean,
no,
it just isn't. So it's a term that I don't use anymore.
yeah, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So we've to your point, we've gotten so apathetic to what we're consuming. Wrapping our food in the plastic and the PFAS so the food doesn't
Yeah.
stick to the paper. And
Mm.
like, what the hell are we doing? And really can't count on any of the regulatory bodies protecting us either.
Well,
So,
it's to that point. It is. I just got back. I did a talk in Palm Springs to 1,600 chemical scientists who are just all of them horrified by what industries that they're working with and for, and many of them actually work in the industry of cleaning up many of these chemicals that we've released into the environment. And you mentioned PFASs, perfluoro or alkaline substances, which we allowed, and our regulatory bodies allowed, to be used in our Teflon coated fry pans, to be sprayed into the material on our couches and furniture, into our drapes and on our beds, into almost everything we use, without, first of all, doing testing over periods of time that allowed us to understand what these chemicals could possibly do for us. And that was when it was first released. Today we know that these chemicals are deadly and they are persistent. They stay, they get passed on from animal to animal, and they are causing all sorts and all manner of human health issues, to the point where many countries are now banning them. But how do we get to the point where our regulatory bodies, the people we actually elect to take care of our best interests, how do we get to the point where, or how did they get to the point where they allow these chemicals to be put into the public domain before they're properly tested? Now, in America, you're allowed to do that. You can bring a chemical to market without it being tested, and until it's proven that it has some adverse effect on humans, it's allowed to be in that marketplace. In Europe now, you have to actually prove that any chemical that you place in any product that goes to market actually has to be tested, and it has to be proven that it won't damage humans and other species before it is allowed in that market. So there is common sense that has occurred there, but it's not global yet. And I wonder to this day how we got to that point where we allow this to happen.
yeah, and that's the thing, 2022, known carcinogens, known endocrine disruptions, uh, known infertility compounds like PFAS and Teflons and phthalates and you name it.
Mm.
And yet, the audacity of some of these regulatory bodies writing blog posts or letters about it and still yet doing nothing to regulate it, which is
Mm.
just insane to me. So it's really about this idea of it's hurting the individual, and if you divorce nature so much, it's if it's hurting you, it's hurting nature. It's hurting there you cannot have one without the other. That's
Yeah.
what's so astonishing.
Well, that's a great point you make there, that those two words, divorce nature. And this is where I think we've got it wrong. We have divorced ourselves from nature. We think nature is something that we keep outside the house, at the front door. And our job is to keep it as far away from us as possible so it doesn't hurt us or maim us. We don't understand, we've lost the understanding that we are nature. We are part of nature. And that without nature's systems, we simply will not exist on this planet. And as we assist those systems to collapse because we don't take care of them, then what we're witnessing is our own demise. And to that point, in my lifetime, 68% of all wildlife on this planet has been destroyed, has gone. And most of the reason for that has been because of human intervention in some way, shape, or form. And as a result of that, we are seeing life support systems collapsing in many ways, whether they be glaciers on mountaintops or coral reefs off the Great Barrier Reef, or the destruction of phytoplankton, the death of phytoplankton because of warming seas, And of course, as you know, every second breath we take comes from the oceans, comes from plankton that provide us with the oxygen we need to breathe. And yet we are polluting the oceans. We're heating them up to a degree now where corals are dying, phytoplankton are dying, and all other species are being threatened. And we need to get back to an understanding that we are part of nature, and as we harm nature, we harm ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good point, and people don't realize that obviously the Amazon is vital and
Mm.
important, but the majority, if not over half of the oxygen on the planet is coming from the phytoplankton in the ocean. And that's the thing that, again, we're mostly blue, man.
Mm.
Like if that
Yeah.
ocean is going sideways, that's not a good it's not a good plan. So, for me, being a blue collar kid from Minnesota, I like to break it all the way down so that those people understand this climate change is not so big, but it's actually so granular that
Mm.
it's affecting you. And those choices of those plastics and those um, polyesters and those clothing and that
Mm.
all of that stuff is supporting industry that is having massive effect, and all of those things that you're using are hurting you right now.
Yeah.
That bib that's easily wiped off, that's PFAS, and that's
Yeah.
around your child's neck.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So we need to wake up to that granular understanding, and that's where it's like that the films and the education brings that emotion to the regular person, so that we can go, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, those products, not a good idea. Those
Yeah.
cereals, not a good idea.
Yeah, and it's look, it's so important to empower people and help people understand that they can make a difference. They can make a difference to their own health starting right now, simply by choosing the food that you eat and making sure that that food comes from healthy, clean sources. And it's not expensive to do that. It just takes a little bit of research, and it takes changing habits. And habits, particularly at our age, are very hard to break, which is why single-use plastics are a harder habit to break for someone of my generation than it is for someone from Generation Z. But we can do that. We can become smarter consumers. Of course, the greatest way to solve many of these problems come from systemic change. We've talked about that. It comes from banning single-use plastics, and that's what we have to do. I mean, circular economies are great for existing plastics, but we have to stop producing this stuff. But at an individual level, you can improve your health so much by getting rid of single-use plastics from out of your home. From, as you said, getting rid of forever chemicals like PFASs, by not using pans coated in Teflon. Get a cast iron pan. It cooks a steak better anyway. It's a far better flavor for you. And by getting rid of these chemicals, buying furniture that doesn't have forever chemicals in your home, getting these chemicals outside of your area of health, putting air purifiers in your home that can detect and get rid of these chemicals is another way of protecting your family. So it is very easy to make that start. And in fact, where these changes have been measured, and there are institutes that have done medical studies on families that have, for example, simply changed their vegetable purchases from those that are GMO and sprayed vegetables, normally industrially cropped vegetables, to local market sourced organic chemicals. They've noticed a change in their blood levels, in the chemicals in their blood levels within a month. That has changed also the way that, for example, their mood, their ability to get to sleep at night, their health has improved dramatically within a month of simply changing their diet. So these are things that are very easy to do in terms of the execution, but difficult to do in terms of changing your personal habit. And that takes a bit of self-control.
Yeah, it's a bit. I mean, it's a big thing. It's like it's the other side of, like, you can eat well and you can do all those things. This other side, this world that we've gotten used to, this chemicalized world of, unfortunately, all over in our personal care in our homes, in our carpets, in our clothing, all of that stuff. That's this looming cloud that we need to continue to work towards to get rid of, because that's fueling those big companies that are also massively dangerous for the planet. So, so dude, we got to talk about the last glacier,
Mm.
because I mean that's been your journey for the last what, 4 or 5
Yep.
years. You
Yep.
worked with extreme sport. You took a cool angle to talking about how I checked out your trailer. I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to watch this thing. Because again, I think you're also finding your way to open up people in a different way
Yeah.
to see this stuff. And I think I want you to talk about it more, because I know for me, when I've went around with indigenous people, they've been there for generations, and they're like, oh yeah, in the last 10 years this has happened, that has happened, that is it. And so your muse of the glacier, I'm so interested in what you discovered and what your people you filmed shared with us.
Yeah, so it was 4 years and 12 countries that we went to film the documentary. It started out after a plastic ocean. I just wanted to do something that was not so depressing. And so I've always been interested in extreme sports and what drives people to do it. And the producer of the film, Malcolm Wood, is into extreme sports and a particular kind called para-alpinism, which is where you use skills such as ice climbing, alpinism, and paragliding to climb mountains and then fly off the top of them. And we wanted to do a documentary because there's only a small group of people that actually do this sport. But when we went into the mountains, and this was 4 years ago, into the European Alps to start filming, it was the middle of winter. And instead of white snow-covered peaks, we found brown. And this was odd to me. And so I started talking to people who had been living and working in the mountains for decades. And they said to me, look, this is the new normal. This has been going on for the last 30 years, where the mountains are heating up, the glaciers are retreating, we're going to lose our jobs, it's getting more dangerous. And this was something that I hadn't really understood. So I immediately went down and spoke to the local meteorologist in Grenoble in France. And he told me that, yes, what the stories, the anecdotes they were telling me were true. The science backed it up. Certainly, the atmosphere was heating up. The mountains were getting warmer. The glaciers were retreating. It's all measured. And I went back to Hong Kong, where I was living at the time, and I gave a talk. And at that talk, at the event, was a scientist from Grenoble, from the oldest ice institute on the planet, Jérôme Chapelez, who showed me and presented a project called the Ice Memory Project, where scientists went around the planet taking core samples from different depths of glaciers. And in those cores are frozen bubbles. And in those bubbles are gases that go back 1 million years. So they can tell what methane levels were, what the CO2 levels were, what nitrous oxide levels looked like, what the temperature was, what water vapor was in the atmosphere going back from today back 1 million years. And it tells a very accurate story. And what it showed was that over the past 8 ice ages, during those 1 million years, there had been this natural oscillation of these gases. As the Earth spun around the sun, as it got closer to the sun, it heated up. As it got further away, it cooled down. And these gases, as they were released and contracted, just went like this up until 160 years ago. And then there's this hockey stick that goes like this. Methane quadruples, CO2 doubles, nitrous oxide goes through the roof, temperatures spike. And you know what happened 160 years ago? It was the start of the Industrial Revolution. And so what they're also finding within these gases are not just the increases, the spikes in these chemicals, but they're also finding soot. They're finding the result of burning coal that's actually in the layers of ice. So we know, first of all, that temperatures have spiked enormously, that these greenhouse gases have spiked, and we know that humans are responsible for it. And that was a story that I hadn't seen scientifically explained in a way that I thought everybody could understand. So it was profound. It was an awakening for me. So I went to Malcolm, my producer, and said, look, we've got a real story here to tell. And we decided to pivot the documentary from being one of just about extreme sports to being one about the climate. And we decided to follow these scientists around the world and film what they were recording, and to use extreme sports as an exciting vehicle, an exciting narrative arc to tell the story. And to do that, it was decided to train me, who's not a mountains guy. I have a fear of heights. I'm an oceans guy. To be able to get into these mountains with these scientists, to be able to tell their story. And we thought that was good for two reasons. First of all, it's an exciting way of taking the audience on the journey. Come and experience what it's really like to throw yourself off a mountain with a handkerchief above you, and and paraglide your way down. Learn what it's like to actually train to be able to do that. But we also thought that the fear that you saw in my eyes, which is real, by the way, as we're climbing these peaks above 19,000 feet, we thought that the story about the challenges that I was facing was very much an analogy of the story that we as humans are facing, the challenge we're facing with the climate. And so we decided to tell it in a way that an 8-year-old could understand, that would create awareness about the climate. So it's not a film for scientists. It's not a film for people who are environmentally aware. It's a film for the ordinary person, the average person who doesn't understand climate perhaps, who would go and watch a documentary that had some excitement about these extreme sports, and along the way learn about the climate and why we have reached this crisis point.
Dude, that's a what a brilliant way. And as you know, filmmaking presents its own, as you say yes to something, the information that's given is like you have to pivot, because it almost, once you say yes to a project, it now is its own entity, kind of presenting the story in front of you. And the fact that you dove in yourself and were facing your own fears, because everyone's gonna acknowledge that, right? Because it's gnarly from that perspective. So that creates an invitation for people. And I think that's those bridges, right? And I love what you said, because that was one of my questions. I haven't seen directly science like that, where it's literally 160 years, here's soot, here's the gases, here's the pollution. And yeah, on the one hand, I've read on the Holocene events, similar to what you're talking about, these 10,000 year cycles where you're like, oh, it cools, it heats, it cools, it heats. You're like, maybe we're just in a cycle. It's not. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, I was, I'm always like, well, we're doing stupid shit. Like, regardless, I can't understand the science enough. I just know that we're using fuels that are unsustainable. We're using pollutions and plastics, and we're creating waste. So for me, that's just insane, and we can do a lot better.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And look, when I try and explain to people what it's like being on planet Earth, this tiny island, because people often forget we've just got this very thin atmosphere that surrounds us, that protects us from oblivion. It protects us from radiation that's constantly bombarding the Earth. It protects us for this enormous heat. It protects us from all this UV. And it does that because it's a shield. Now, when you encompass something in a shield, whatever you do within that shield affects, because it can't get out, right? There's nothing beyond there except the void of space. So it's like locking yourself in your car and smoking cigarettes and eating takeaway food that's pushed through the window. Eventually your car is going to be filled with plastic and wrappers and empty drinking cups and straws, and you're not going to be able to breathe because it's filled with the carbon dioxide that you're expelling and all the smoke that you've been putting into the atmosphere from the cigarettes. And that's not going to improve. And that's what we've kind of got with the Earth, because we are trapped in this vessel that is protected. And the more we burn fossil fuels, the more they go into the atmosphere, the more they supercharge the atmosphere, and that carbon pump that regulates life, that allows plants to grow when they take in carbon dioxide and synthesize and turn it into energy and give off oxygen. That carbon pump is completely interrupted. And that's the message, that's the very simple message, a very simple concept of how it works. But certainly it's a lot easier to think of it in that way, I think, than when you dive into the science, as I said, which can be very dense.
I think that's a great example. It's like this microcosm. If you put yourself in this case, a car or a bubble,
Yeah.
and you started doing all these things, well, what do you think shows up? Right?
Yes.
What do you think? Because the whole thing, I think, is from not only as an individual, the environment we create. We also know down at the microbiological level, the environment you create, right? The epidemiology, the epidemiologic understanding of the food you ate, the stress you have, the toxins you either consume or get exposed to creates the environment of your microbiological system. Therefore, creating the environment of you're either going to harbor disease or you're going to invite it out. So that's this thing. And so if we do the same thing with our precious planet, if we're doing same thing in our cities, hell, if I just leave all my trash out at front and I tell the guy not to pick it up, what do you think shows up?
Yes.
Right? The bacteria, the
Yeah.
worms, the
The
bugs, the
rats.
vermin, the
Yeah.
rats, because that's part of the system.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the earth has a fever, right? It's like it has a fever, it's hot, where it's gonna there's stuff that's being created here, and by our hand, the billions of people. It's just, I just go back to, when you break all of this down, why would we do things knowing that it hurts people, individuals, insects, bees, the animals, our fellow neighbor? And when you continue to open up the aperture, you're seeing the pollution. You're seeing that. I mean, I was just reading an article, the heavy metals that are in our soils is so astonishingly scary, right? From pollution. It's just like, you look at every little aspect of this, and it's like, we got to get our shit together.
Yeah, well, there's a study that just came out that showed that, you would think it'd be healthy to have your own chickens and grow your own eggs in your backyard. But the study came out and showed that hen eggs from that are propagated at home actually have heavier, more concentrations of heavy metals, because the earth in urban environments, in most urban environments, is so polluted. And you're seeing that happen through the fact that these hens go out, they eat worms, they eat grass, they eat seeds that are in your home and in your backyard. And of course, the grasses and foods and animals and insects that are growing in that environment are also feeding from the soil and what the soil produces. And they're pushing these chemicals and these heavy metals further up the food chain. And when you look at that, and at the same time, there was another study that came out that said the air we breathe now is just so polluted that it doesn't pass the many world standards in terms of being the safety levels. So we've polluted absolutely everything, and it sounds really grim, and it's very easy to become despondent about it. I mean, when we finished making A Plastic Ocean and I watched the film, I was so depressed. I mean, we'd been traveling for 4 years, we'd been making the film for 8 years, and you'd think we'd just become numb to what we were seeing and witnessing. But we were so depressed by what we saw at the end of the film that we decided we had to go out and change the third act and introduce solutions, because we didn't want people leaving the cinema feeling there was nothing they could do, that it's just time to give up. So we went and did that, and we spent another 6 months doing that. And we did the same with The Last Glaciers, because traveling the Earth, going into mountain areas and seeing these glaciers that are disappearing, seeing in the Himalaya, for example, which is considered the Earth's third pole because it has that much ice. It doesn't just provide water for the Hindu Kush watershed and 2 billion people globally and the products that are grown in Asia and distributed throughout the world for all of us. It also acts as a reflector, and as heat comes in through that shield into the Earth, it reflects heat back into the atmosphere and it regulates the planet, the temperature on the planet. But since the 70s, more than a third of ice has disappeared from the Himalaya, which absolutely shocked me when we arrived there, when we found that out. And this new study that had been done by a scientific institute put together by the 8 countries that surround the Himalayan area called ICIMOD, they said that by the end of the century, more than 2/3 of the Himalayan ice would have disappeared. Now that provides so much for so many people, as I just mentioned. And it's not just the locals. While we were there was migration already happening. Many villages that rely on glacial water and runoff, for example, for hydropower. Those glaciers had receded so far up the mountain, in some cases disappearing completely, that they no longer had hydropower. So people were on the move, and as they move from these mountain areas, they go down into the big cities and they put more pressure on those city areas, and so the resources become a lot more difficult for people that are already there. And that's another point that we're going to face. I mean, one of the conclusions we came to in the last glaciers was, as these polar ice caps melt and these glaciers melt, the migration that it's causing is what's going to be the greatest challenge that many countries will face. Because, as you mentioned, this is a blue planet. 71% of the Earth is actually water. That doesn't leave a lot of ground for 9.8 billion people, which is how many people will be on the planet by 2050. To live on. Now, when you live at the available land, most of that's arid. There's only a small percentage of that that's actually habitable, and that's along the coastlines and some of the mountain areas. And so there's going to be intense competition for the resources that's available in these areas that will remain habitable. And people won't care about borders, they won't care about laws when they're trying to feed their kids and hydrate their family. So people are going to move, and that we're already seeing that happen. And already many governments, I've spoken to national security advisors all over the world, and they say that the biggest threat to them isn't other countries. It's not, in the case of the US, it's not China, it's not North Korea, it's not Russia. It is mass migration caused by climate change.
Yeah, it's full-on climate refugees, and it's happening right now. And that's I didn't know that. I mean, I'm a really I was in Bhutan in 2007, and I fell in love. I mean, Himalayas and the hydropower, and you're celebrating, you're utilizing the natural resources. So let's talk a little bit kind of at this end here. So obviously there's a lot going on, and I think the thing that fuels me the most is, in order for things to change, Craig, we have to face it, right? Yeah. So you're facing it, you're finding the scientists, you're facing it. Just like any relationship, if you can't have the hard conversation, you're just not, you're gonna have a shitty relationship. You're both are gonna become distant. You'll probably get divorced and separated or whatever it is. So it's like the same thing with us. Yeah. We have to turn and face this world and face what we're doing that isn't working or is not working very well. That said, I think there's a lot of incredible people, organizations, and systems that are starting to emerge. So from your perspective, what are some things you're excited about from that solution side of things?
Yeah, great question. First of all, it's young people. I love giving talks all over the world to young kids, because they have a long future. And look, this is part of the problem. It's generational. Most of our political leaders, corporate leaders, they're in their 50s and 60s and 70s. They're looking at a very short future. So for many of them, they don't have the energy to change. They don't have the energy to be part of the change of the systems, because they just want to take what they think is owed to them, whether it be a bonus or retirement, 401k, whatever it is, and they want to go and enjoy the rest of their life. But for young people, that's not the case. They've got 60, 70, 80 years ahead of them, and hopefully longer with the way that medical research is going. And so they've got to be optimistic. So they give me optimism. So in terms of what encourages me and gives me optimism, it's young people. But when I go out and talk to corporations and I dive into systems where we do need change, such as in the political arena, such as at corporate level with proper corporate leadership, there is so much going on. The finance industry has a big role to play, because the finance industry lends money to governments. It lends money to corporates so that they can build the companies that they do. They can do the research and development that they need. And so if we can encourage the people who have their hands on the levers of finance to finance appropriate development, research, and design, and design is a big thing. It's very much a part of the solution. Single-use plastics were just a terrible design. It was a design failure. If we can design single-use plastics, we can design another product that replaces them, that actually does good for the planet. We have the capability of doing that. And if we put the money into young entrepreneurs and research and developers, we can help them achieve that. That's actually happening. When I talk to financiers who've turned the corner, who have worked in industries that have not produced goods that have been good for the planet, have seen the light and now want to pivot. People like Mark Carney and others who are the heads of European banks and UK banks and institutions, they're telling me that there's $145 trillion that they and their colleagues and people within the financial sector they're working with are putting into capital markets to fund renewable energy, projects, research and development. That is a lot of money. And that's not money that they're forecasting. That's money that's going into markets now. So what I find is that governments are generally reactive. They're not proactive. So I look towards what's happening already, what corporations are doing, what young people are doing, what research and development and universities, what they're doing, as opposed to what governments are legislating. Because by the time it gets to government and policymakers, it's generally already happened. And what you find is that legacy industries that are going out the door, like oil and gas, lobby very hard at a political level, because that's their last gasp. That's the last place that they can get influence to help them see them through the transitions that are coming. And that's what's actually happening with oil and gas now. We have to transition. We are transitioning. And we're seeing universities, we're seeing insurance funds, we're seeing governments in countries all over the world that are transitioning their investments out of oil and gas portfolios, because they recognize infrastructure there is an assets, a legacy assets. They're stranded assets, if you want to call it that, and they're not going to make their money back off that in the years to come. So they're better off taking that money and putting it into what is coming up towards the future, and that is renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro, all of these other ways of making energy that are kind to the planet and much cheaper, as it turns out. And we're going to see governments pivoting towards that, because there's no point building infrastructure for a legacy industry like oil and gas that's only going to last another 20 years. You're much better putting all that money into infrastructure that has a long future. And that's what we're already seeing happen. And you can go to places like Costa Rica or Scotland. Scotland, which held COP26, the climate change conference last year, is 98% renewable energy. Most of its electricity already comes from renewable energy. Where I come from in Tasmania, we're carbon negative. We've got hydroelectricity. Most of our electricity comes from river systems and solar and other systems like that. So not only is it possible, it's already being done in places around the planet. And people who say, look, you can't do it, you can't build electric cars because the energy it takes to build those cars is still coming from oil and gas. They're not seeing that energy is actually being extracted from renewables already to make those cars. We've already seen, for example, carbon negative steel now being produced from renewable energy. And we've seen manufacturers like Volvo, who are the first to actually take that carbon negative steel and put it into the manufacturing process. So that's what gives me hope. I'm seeing it happen. I think in the media, we need to help bring these stories to light so that other people see what we're happening, and so that they also understand that there is hope there, and that we've got this small window of about 8 years to make this transition happen.
Yeah, man. And thank you for that, because I share that hope and that optimism. I think because you certainly even longer than me have dove into these things, you start realizing that there's certain players that got their heads screwed on, and they're creating technologies. One really good friend of mine I've known for 17 years has been dedicated to the planet, and he's now at that point. He just got invited to the White House. He just finished a talk 2 days ago, and even though listen, he walked away going, they don't know what they're doing. Right.
Yes,
So, right.
that this
So,
is the case. This is what I find as well, and I'm sure you do. A lot of them just aren't aware
no,
of what's happening.
no, they don't know what's going on. And then they have, in this case, I think $370 billion that they just signed over. So on the one hand, it's scary because they don't know what the hell they're doing. On the other hand, my friend walked away going, and literally, he was the only one that had a real sustainable solution. So we're also doing some stuff with footprint and some material science that he's working with. So we have plasma reactors that are renewable, and heat modulation and creation. So we're able to use heat and plastic annihilation, which is a whole nother conversation. So we have ways to create clean fuel from plastic, but also annihilate it down to carbon black with no chemicals whatsoever. We
Yeah.
have ways now where we can desalinate on demand and create clean water in these coastal areas, as well as using sodium chloride as power sources, because we're able to heat sodium chloride and then it becomes a small bomb that you can make. So that said, we have to put our attention on all of these things. And I think we are at this point where these people are starting to wake up. Money is starting to be funneled. And there's enough pressure from the billions of people for these solutions to start taking hold, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking there about pyrogenesis, and particularly with the plasma torches that are able to heat plastics to a point where they don't burn, they just return them to their atomic state. And desalination, of course, which was only ever not viable because of the energy it took to run a desalination plant, which meant you had to burn a lot of diesel to do it. But now with renewable energy, of course, that's no longer a problem. And to that point, I'm working with some people now who are building perpetual energy machines, which take nothing. They start themselves, and they're using inertia and magnets and all sorts of things. And they're building them to scale, from the size of one you can put to run a refrigerator forever, to one you can put in your car, to one that can run a country the size of Grenada, for example. This is all being developed, and this is where we should have been 100 years ago. And in fact, we started to go in that way with people like Nikola Tesla. Many people don't realize the first cars were actually run on electricity. We just went in the wrong direction because we were lured by the promise of what money could provide us in terms of improving our lives, which of course it has in some ways in terms of the medical field and everything else, but ultimately it's just allowed us to trash the planet in a very quick way when you look at the time scale of how long this planet has been here, and how other organisms have developed and looked after it until we came along. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. The good news is it's doable, but we have to do it now. Going back to your first point, we can't wait for that smack to the face, because it's going to be too late by the time we pick ourselves up off the ground and realize what we've done.
Yeah, and it's such a good point, and most people won't realize that we had many of these solutions already. I mean, the Chicago subway was run on air compression until Edison said, no, 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 let's use electricity. Right? So
Yes.
so it's things like that, and there's many stories like that. Popular Science magazine had all this stuff on the cover, and Nikola Tesla had all of these incredible technologies and free energy technologies, and then
Mm.
the god of profit
Yes.
started taking hold. So I agree, and the time is now, and I just appreciate you, dude. I appreciate what you're willing to do. The time that it takes to produce films like you've produced is like, that's blood, sweat, and tears. And
Yep.
also, I also want to give a shout out. You lost a DP in the
Yes.
process
Yep.
of filming.
Cody Tuttle was our director of photography for the last glaciers. Unfortunately, he was training for the Himalayan expedition in the Sierra Nevada in California, and he suffered a collapse of his paraglider and hit the ground and didn't recover, unfortunately. So, you go through, and it's not unusual in these sports to have these accidents happen. And we witnessed several deaths on the mountains while we were there as well and filmed them. But we all were aware of the dangers, and we spoke about this before we fully embarked on the film, and we're all very adamant that no matter what happened to us as individuals, we wanted this film to be made. We wanted it to go ahead, and we've worked with Cody's wife, Charisse, to get the film finished. She came with us to the Himalayas. She was incredibly brave, and she wanted to carry on his story as well, and the effort that he put into not only making films and environmental films, but also helping people like the Nepalese recover from the earthquakes of 2015. And there's a couple, they've done a lot of work there. So the film is in memory of him, and we're very proud that he was able to be a part of it.
Great, beautiful work, man. I'm honored and grateful that we're able to have this time, and just grateful for all the work you've done, and hopefully we can do some more stuff together in the future. So how can people see the film? What's the scenario? When do you think it's coming out?
Yep.
What's
Thank you. So we've made a special 40-minute version, which is being released by IMAX now in North America. If you go to the IMAX website, you'll see where it's screening and all the dates. It's about to be launched in Europe, where I am. I'm in Italy at the moment, and in fall, and in Australia on October 14. And we've got the long version, the cinematic version, which is an hour and 40 minutes long. And we're still working on how best to release that, and which distribution networks we can to get that out. And as a director and a storyteller, we'd rather people go out and also witness the long version, which goes into a lot of the science in a lot more depth. So we're hoping to bring that to people within the next couple of months, and fingers crossed be able to share it globally.
right on, Greg? I'm honored, and thank you for the time, and you're the best, dude.
Thanks, mate, and likewise with the work you do. And look, I look forward to working with you in the future, and taking the work that we're doing for companies like Footprint, and creating awareness around what they're doing, and making some more content. Because ultimately we enjoy what we do, don't we? And making content and creating the awareness can be tough, but it also brings great reward, and it's something that I enjoy immensely, and I know you do too.